We're approaching the end of the term. In this presentation, I want to discuss cultural holism and intercultural pedagogy. We'll take some time to do a deep dive into these concepts. In cultural holism, societies are viewed as whole. They are not viewed as lacking something and therefore are not legitimate. They have a language identity, they have cultural norms, and all the elements that go along with these. As educators, we are committed to understanding the multiple worlds our students inhabit. Education is committed to addressing the individual and their worlds. Any one of us is connected to multiple worlds. In the context of deaf children, as noted before, the deaf community is a collective culture. Their knowledge, moral principles, beliefs, and so on are towards maintaining the community. Community life is handed down from older generations to younger. In a collective culture, the expectation is that everyone contributes to the community in order to make a better future for deaf children. Deaf culture is on a continuum between the collective culture of the deaf community and the individualistic culture of the hearing mainstream, where individual achievement is highly valued and praised. The focus is on individual needs, individual desires, and individualistic values. The deaf culture is usually a collective culture, but we do see movement along the continuum. How do deaf children get introduced to cultural holism? Knowledge is handed down to them by family, schools, and majority culture, which likely embraces individualism. The deaf child has to navigate values and beliefs of the collective culture, as well as the expectations of mainstream society's individualistic expectations. Cultural holism accepts both these worlds. Both cultures will use the knowledge gained from family, school, and the majority culture to understand and support the child's development. So how do we teach using cultural holism for the deaf child? We begin by starting the cognitive engine. This is done by nurturing the child's visual processing skills, helping them observe their environment, and not overemphasize reliance on what they are able to hear. The child should use both to the extent they are able. Teach them how to think, how to read and interpret what is going on around them. What are those people over there doing? Can you interpret what might be going on by their movements, where they are, body language, and facial expressions? Guide students to be attentive to everything around them. Start with basic concepts of name, birthday, and the child's social network. Teach family relationships, mother, father, cousins, aunts, uncle, grandparents, and so on. Interactions with family and friends. During this time, you'll be able to assess their level of hearing. Many deaf children are led to believe that they have normal hearing. Surprising, isn't it? Students coming into my class at the age of 14 genuinely felt, thought, believed that their hearing is equal to that of other peers. I had to confront them. I flat out asked them, why do you think you're here in this program? If you hear the same as everyone else, then why were you placed in this program? They reasserted that they hear as well as everyone else. So I just replied by saying, great, that must mean you understand everything and everyone. So feel free to join your peers in the other classes. If you can hear that well, then you don't need to be in my program. You are free to go. We can surmise, as they were growing up, they were never taught the truth about their hearing loss. They were led to believe that they had a slight loss of hearing, but were essentially the same as anyone else. If they had been taught the truth, then they would have felt more accepting of themselves and may have developed a positive deaf identity. We don't need another 14-year-old to have an identity crisis. As you get the cognitive engine going, you'll want to introduce learning through various modalities: hearing, seeing, touch, taste, movement, smell, and so on. Help them to discover what can be learned using different modalities to engage the senses. Consider cultural norms. In the deaf community, touching is perfectly acceptable. There are rules, but it's not uncommon for us to touch one another on the shoulder or the back to get someone's attention. In the hearing mainstream, you say someone's name, Joanne, or excuse me. You would not touch the other person. The child needs to be taught the expectations of these different contexts. Beyond touching to get attention, the deaf community is a hugging community. Upon arrival and leave taking, it's very common to hug the people you know. This is not common in the hearing community. Hugs are mostly saved for special occasions. But in the deaf community, hugs are given and received much more readily. Context dictates expectations. Creating deaf spaces can begin in pre-K. The deaf mainstreamed elementary child is always in the hearing classroom. They live the hearing world. Having their own deaf space can be a reprieve from all the hearingness around them. They will learn that deaf space is safe for them, away from the prying eyes or stares of others. It's good for them to have a space where they feel comfortable and can sign with others and just be themselves. Someplace they can go to where no one will make a comment on how their voice sounds funny or how they talk differently. Someplace where they are not left out of conversations because they can't hear. Someplace where they are not under the gaze of the interpreter who may or may not understand them. A space where no one is judging the child and they can be themselves and will feel safe. This place will enable the child to rest and escape the pressures they may feel isolated in the hearing world. Somewhere to go where they can disconnect from the dominant culture's expectations. That's deaf space. And creating this space can start when the child is young. The students in my program had never experienced deaf space. They may have had access to a resource room, but that is not deaf space. That is still judgy hearing space, which does not help a child feel safe. It wasn't until they came into my classroom that they were introduced to deaf space. Between the ages of 7 to 10, their acquisition of sign language accelerates. They can communicate more about their emotions, what they're feeling, the feelings of others. They become much more communicative and fluency improves. In addition, their vocabulary is growing as they are introduced to the different subject areas in school. During this time, they begin to play with language, begin to appreciate it. They'll begin exploring metaphor, symbolism, and other creative ways to use sign language. About this time, they'll recognize that sign language is theirs. It doesn't belong to the teacher or the interpreter. It belongs to them, their culture, their community. Now we're beginning to establish the deaf children's place in the world. We start with a formal analysis of ideas and information about their identity. When those 14-year-old students first began in my program, I purposefully did not introduce the concept of identity. I waited 2 years. They needed to develop more sign language. They needed to be exposed to deaf adults, to interact with other deaf people. Once I judged they were in a positive place and ready to accept they were different, we talked about identity. When they first came to the program, some were ashamed, embarrassed that they had to learn sign language. They were negative about sign language. They said they only wanted to speak, even though their speech wasn't intelligible. They simply wanted to identify themselves as hearing people in a hearing world. It was a struggle. They needed to see a deaf teacher who signs fluently, to observe positive deaf role models enjoying happy lives. They needed to see there is a community they belong to. To do this, we had the students attend community events, including marches. Through this exposure, they became more empowered, believing that they could do something with their lives. They see that the deaf community truly values their difference. But growing up, these children were always told to work hard on their speech and hearing, and then you'll fit right in. You'll be a superstar. Your objective is to become hearing. Function in the hearing world, despite the hearing loss. Just fit in. Then you'll be a superstar. Juxtapose that to the deaf community's view, where they don't try to hide the fact they are deaf. The realization of the existence of two worldviews can be a big shock to the student. They reflect on the years that their parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles encouraged them, praised them for their speech, cheerleading them along, telling them that speech development is their path to success. This is the identity messaging children were receiving. In the deaf community, it's about what you give, what each of us contributes to the collective for our common good. For the deaf community, collaboration is valued, and your part in the collective is where deaf identity is forged. So the student is confronted with two very different worldviews. Now they are in a place where they can explore the differences between the deaf and hearing worldviews. Guidance is given regarding the different rules for each context. The students need to recognize the different expectations, behaviors, and norms between the two worlds. And each world has its strengths and weaknesses. For example, a weakness in the deaf community are jealousies against members who are very successful. Petty actions or criticisms will attempt to bring the person down. I am one example. I have my PhD, and many in the deaf community are very happy for me and tremendously supportive. But there are others who are jealous or bitter and through gossip and backstabbing wish to bring me down. Sadly, this is not uncommon in the deaf community and is a weakness. The strengths are positive feelings of belonging and of deaf identity, collaboration toward common goals, commitment to deaf children's education. I personally enjoy participating in the deaf community, deaf culture, and celebrating deaf arts, such as drama, storytelling, poetry, all those things. Those are just a few of the positives of the deaf community. What's so bad about the hearing world? Well, we can't hear. That world functions as if everyone can. The burden to communicate falls to the deaf person to negotiate. We miss a lot. We are judged as inferior. The advantages of the hearing world are the variety of opportunities to be involved with things that we find interesting. Navigating both worlds has to be learned. In my case, when I am in the deaf community, I don't discuss my PhD studies or research. I never use my title as doctor. I am simply Joanne. These encounters for me are mostly social settings, so it's my opportunity to chill out and chat. I am not there to light a fire and start organizing any movements. Separating work and social life is acceptable behavior for me. While in the hearing world, it's pretty much nonstop talking about my various research projects, proposals, funding, teaching, publications, and so on. We learn to adjust our behavior to the context we find ourselves in. I want to conclude with these final thoughts on the deaf classroom, which I was privileged to have worked in for so many years. In my experience, the deaf classroom was very often a place of great fun and joy. The feeling of achievement and celebration was ever present. Deaf educators have multiple ways to integrate real-life experiences into the material they are teaching, no matter what the subject, be it science, social studies, math, English language arts, ASL studies, fine arts. When the instructor weaves real-life deaf experiences into their teaching, the children would be engaged on a personal level. As they learned, they would explore and discover how they could triumph despite the odds. There is this deaf cultural concept of 1,000 small victories, where each piece of information gleaned from or about the hearing world is seen as a victory itself. We learn about some expected behavior in the hearing world we hadn't realized. These are seen as victories. This is very much what happens in many deaf classrooms, the sharing of these discoveries. Through this sharing, students gain self-confidence that they can successfully function in the hearing world without giving up their deaf identity. They can have both. That's cultural holism. Thank you.